Respectfully speaking, you're a little bit silly here. I'm not part of the White House medical unit. What I can speak to from experience, who's someone who's around the president some 4 or 5 days a week, that every time I'm around him, I'm tested usually about an hour in advance. Then there's usually about an hour cooling off period to make sure that the test is clear, everything is good. Then when I'm in the presence of the president, I'm usually somewhere in the 10, 12 feet away. Never any closer than 6 to 8 feet, definitely. And so anyone who's ever in a room with the president has been tested, has been cleared. Now, what I can't speak to, again, I'm not part of the White House medical unit. I'm on the campaign team. So I can tell you from my experience of being around the president, the protocols that people go through. What I can't speak to are the White House medical unit. But again, as we go back to the whole reason why I wanted to join you is to tell you, since the president is in Walter Reed, he's in the hospital recovering from COVID, here's how he is feeling. Here's how we get back out there. Here's how the campaign this week will be out with Operation Mega as we launch the vice president and the family. That's what I can speak to.
And you've said that. And you've said that multiple times. You've gotten that message out, Jason. Let me ask a few more questions because I want to try to get some more information while I have you here because you have been in contact and because you are part of this campaign. And you're anxious, obviously, to get back out there. And let's talk about the conduct that in any kinds of additional protocols you may put in place moving forward. Will the campaign mandate people to wear masks at events for this president?
The campaign always has and always will hand out masks and make sure that people are told that they need to wear them. And
it's a yes or no question, though. Are you going to mandate they wear the masks?
Anna, you have to let me finish. Just one of my
It's a yes or no question, Jason. Are you going to mandate they wear the masks?
I'm answering. We're going to tell people, just like we always have, that they need to wear the masks. We've always told people they need to wear the masks. And we're going to continue to do that, and that's why we've been doing it since long before this.
Okay, so you're going to continue to do what you've done before, is what I'm hearing you say. You will not mandate them to wear masks. You will encourage them, but if they don't, that's okay. Let me ask you a question about why the president...
And we're going to continue to be safe.
Can you answer the question as to, why the president went to a campaign event in Bedminster on Thursday after Hope Hicks tested positive for the coronavirus?
So what I know is that the president did not have a positive test at the time.
I'm not asking if he had a positive test before that.
Anna,
he knew
I'm answering your question,
Hope Hicks had a positive test. You're not answering my question. You're not answering my question.
I am answering your question. That was a RNC event, and so I did not have eyes on the exact logistics, so I can't speak to the exact movements on that evening. But I do know that the president did receive his positive test then Thursday evening, and then a number of different protocols were then put into place.
Right. I'm asking you about what happened before that, though. Before he received his positive test, which was, he went to this Bedminster event prior to going to, but this was a campaign event. You're the campaign senior advisor. I understand what you're saying.
It was an RNC event.
So you're saying you had no control over that. You had no connection to that.
What I'm telling you is that was not something that I was part of the planning or part of the organizing for. And so I can't speak to that. What I can speak to are Trump rallies. Those are things that I have a granular level of understanding of how we go about doing those. And I've seen it in action where we're taking folks' temperatures and we're urging people to be safe. We're urging them to be careful. And that's, again, what the president told me yesterday in our conversation. Be careful. Make sure that people are washing their hands, using hand sanitizer, wearing masks. And I think with the president, when he gets out of Walter Reed here, you're going to see him continue to express that and continue to share that with people. Having gone through this himself, I think he can be an inspiration to people to get through this.
That just seems disingenuous to say he'll continue to express these messages where he has been downplaying the coronavirus. He's been mocking people for wearing masks, not encouraging people to wear masks, mocking people for wearing masks. And in fact, let's just play what he said at the debate on Tuesday night. Can we play it, guys? Listen.
I think wearing a face mask,
I don't wear masks like him. Every time you see him, he's got a mask. He could be speaking 200 feet away from it. He shows up with the biggest mask I've ever seen.
Jason, that's not encouraging people to wear masks.
Anna, he was exactly right. When you're too often, Joe Biden has used a mask as a prop. The mask when you can't socially distance.
You think he's using the mask as a prop when we know masks save lives?
I think too often.
Is that not important to this administration? Is that not important to the Trump campaign?
Anna, if you're some 200 feet away from somebody, You don't need to wear a mask. You don't. And in fact, Joe Biden has flip-flopped so many times on this whole outdoor national mask mandate. He was for it, then he was against it, then he was for it. In fact, Democratic governors such as Evers in Wisconsin or Walz in Minnesota have refused to go along with Joe Biden. So they, for example, have an exception.
Joe Biden's not the president of the United States
usage.
Right now.
Well, but hold on.
President Trump is the president of the United States, and if he is to lead by example, what he is showing does not the example that scientists and experts who are telling us what to do to stay safe would recommend.
Anna, you're trying to bail out Joe Biden, and I think that
no,
that's
I'm not here to defend
unfair.
Joe Biden. I'm asking about President Trump's messaging and behavior.
I'm telling you very clearly that Joe Biden, his rhetoric and his actions do not match up. So, for example, if he says there needs to be an outdoor
Joe Biden
mandate,
is not the one in the hospital having contracted the coronavirus.
And President Trump, and this is the whole point, that you can have every safeguard in place. There are so many things we don't know about this virus. You can have everything in place and still contract it. So the whole point is we have to go and defeat this virus. We can't stay locked up in our basements forever. Americans.
And I'm so sorry, Jason Miller, we just lost his satellite because that interview went longer than we had expected. Jason Miller, my thanks to you for joining us and taking those questions this evening. We'll continue discussing our breaking news that President Trump is back at Walter Reed just after a photo op visit to supporters outside. Stay with us. You're live in the CNN Newsroom.
The shark vac.
Washington poll, ABC News poll shows 58% of Americans disapprove of the way Trump is handling the pandemic. Democrats need to flip a net gain of 3 seats if Biden wins, or 4 seats if he loses, to take control of the Senate. And by the way, Brett, John Tillis, who tested positive for the virus, he is locked in a very tight and the most expensive Senate race in the country. And now he'll be off the campaign trail for a little bit. So we'll see.
Tom Zillis in North Carolina. Brian, thanks. We're back with our panel, Harold Ford, Julie Pace, and Mark Thiessen. Mark, any way, shape, or form that this confirmation process for Judge Barrett does not go through before Election Day?
Oh, it's going to go through without a doubt. I mean, look, there's no reason. You don't even have to have a hearing. There's no rule that requires a hearing whatsoever. And certainly you can do a virtual hearing. The Judiciary Committee since May has had 6 virtual hearings confirming 22 nominees, and Democrats participated virtually. So all of a sudden now they insist it has to be in person. The difference is you can't vote virtually. They have to be there. But the chairman of the committee has almost complete control over how a committee works. So I'm sure he's going to be able to engineer the vote. On the Senate races, by the way, Brett, inside baseball, this actually helps Republicans because Chuck Schumer was refusing to allow the Senate to go into recess. So he was holding all these vulnerable Republican senators in Washington.
Tonight, I'll be eating 4 cheese totally in here.
Recess to happen until the 19th, and so they can actually go home and campaign.
Julie?
Well, I think Mark is right on the Senate hearings for Amy Coney Barrett. I think that Republicans are going to do everything they can to try to get this done, both her committee hearings and also the full Senate vote before the election. I do think there's a question of the politics of doing that, particularly when you are dealing with a situation where right now 2 members of this committee, the Judiciary Committee, have tested positive. So I think that Republicans are balancing a lot of priorities right now. Obviously, priority number 1 for them does seem to be getting the justice confirmed, and they will have to deal with the consequences, if there are negative consequences of that, in November.
Harold, any downside on the Senate races for pushing forward?
Well, first, the constitutional mandate has been satisfied. The president has nominated and put forward a nominee. The Senate now has to advise and consent. How they do that, how fast they do that, I'm not as convinced as my friends Julie and Mark are, that this thing will move as quickly. I think the polling will impact this. I don't think we can overstate how much this thrusts the corona issue back in the face of voters. President Trump a few days ago said that we were turning a corner, and he could see the end of the coronavirus. I was a little amused to hear my friend Mark say that the president, repeating what the president said, that now that President Trump has had it, he understands it better. I mean, it didn't take President Bush and attacking the Taliban to understand the Taliban. It didn't take President Reagan being attacked by communism personally, or the Soviets, to understand that. The president should have understood. He should have listened to his doctors and those around him. But let me not get political here. I hope the president and want the president to get better. But the politics of this, You can't deny in these states where these races are tightening, Brett, I don't know how this will turn out. We have to, I think, wait for the next few days to get a feel for where voters are and how voters feel about these particular races.
Mark, quickly a response.
Election day.
Wasn't doing a good job on COVID before. It's just that he has now had the disease, so he can speak to it in a way that that Joe Biden can't and other people can't. He has experienced the disease. He's learned from his doctors how to treat it. He's done it firsthand. George W. Bush went down to the site of 9/11 and said that people are going to hear from us soon. Now Donald Trump can say the same thing when it comes to COVID.
And President Trump has the best.
You wonder, Julie, how big a story this Secret Service driving this drive-by is going to be.
I think the president needs to hope that nobody who was in that car with him contracts coronavirus.
All right, panel, thank you very much. When we come back, how the coronavirus is impacting the world of sports.
Tweeted from inside the hospital, where he actually announced that he was about to come out and speak to the growing group of supporters who have been here really throughout the weekend, but the numbers have been growing throughout the day. Today you can hear even now many of them chanting and honking their horns behind me. And then just a few minutes after that video was released, the president was seen in his motorcade through the window of his vehicle, driving down Rockville Pike, it's the street just behind me, past his supporters. The president was wearing a mask, but he was inside a vehicle with the windows rolled up. The Secret Service agent who was driving the vehicle also was wearing a mask, but we can't express enough how clearly in violation of the typical protocols for minimizing risk when you have a COVID patient this represents. In fact, CDC guidance, this is the president's own administration's CDC guidance, says that if you have a hospitalized COVID patient, they should only be moved outside of their hospital room for medically essential purposes. I think what we're learning tonight, Alicia, there had been this question after we learned that the president had coronavirus about whether this was going to be a game changer, whether the calculus that we've seen from the White House about not needing to strictly follow all of the protocols around mask wearing, around social distancing at the president's events, whether they were going to now say, okay, the president and many people around him have contracted this illness. Are we going to start going by the book of what doctors say you need to do to minimize exposure to this? Clearly, what we're seeing tonight is that the White House is not going to be doing that in the future, despite the fact that both the president and the First Lady are currently fighting COVID-19.
Malcolm, there is always the concern when we see something like this that it's taking our eye off of the bigger story, the fact that the president has COVID-19, the lack of transparency coming out of his administration, the reporting on his taxes, his debate performance. I mean, there's so much else we could be talking about. Tell me, as you watch this, why you believe it matters.
Well, it matters. First off, let's step back to the actual act that he carried out here. You have just seen a president of the United States use a critical illness which has killed over 210,000 Americans and use his hospital stay as a campaign technique to go out and rally his supporters because he's likely upset that he has sagging poll numbers. This is absolutely disgraceful. And here's another reason why it's disgraceful. He is literally a seething, transmitting cauldron of coronavirus. Just because he has the mask on doesn't mean that he's not going to be shedding the virus. He is shedding the virus. He is positive. They have been fighting to mitigate the effects of this virus. But when he steps in the hallway outside of his quarantined space, he now puts an element of risk into that hallway. When he goes all the way down there, Walter Reed was my hospital for a very long time. When you go down into those hallways, you're going by other patients in patient areas, even if you're taken securely down to the presidential limousine. The Secret Service are now exposed. The people who have to protect you, who have to come into your immediate area, are exposed. The doctors are being ignored. The entire national security profile of the United States Armed Forces and government changes when the President of the United States immediately moves from a secure location to an unsecure location like the street. This is the height of utter arrogance. It's just as simple as that. This man is a danger to not only himself, but to all around him because he has this virus, and it could also have adverse effects because of the exertion that he just made.
Malcolm, this happens against already complaints, concerns about a lack of transparency from this administration when it comes to talking about the president's condition. Can you put that in context for us? What is the national security risk to not having the proper information readily available?
Well, it's as simple as this. We can't believe a word he says. We can't believe a word the White House says. We now can't believe the doctors at the White House. Every time something happens, we find it's more severe. So how am I going to believe him when somebody says there is an imminent, immediate danger to the people of the United States and I must take immediate offensive action? We can't believe him. And neither can our allies, neither can anyone who would have to support us in those operations. This man's credibility is shot. And now people are going to wonder tomorrow whether this whole coronavirus thing that he was supposedly had is a hoax or not. Because his people don't believe it. They're out on the street with no mask, you know, running up and down Rockville Pike with trucks with flags, thinking that this is all nothing. And that all they have to do is get out there and support the president, and that his poll numbers will go up. Again, it's a national security risk to the United States. One other thing, I've stood a lot of watches as an intelligence watch officer around the community. When the President of the United States moves, thousands of people have to immediately change everything that they're doing. Their entire posture has to change. It's sort of like straightening up when the principal comes in the room. But that straightening up happens with atomic weapon systems and ballistic missile submarines and airborne aviation command posts because the president's on the move. He moved thousands and thousands and thousands of people just by getting in that car to go around from one front gate at Bethesda, turn around and go back into another front gate. The man does not care about how the people who have to support this nation do it.
Well, Malcolm, you bring me to my next point, which is that for months now we have been reading about morale inside of the Secret Service, concern about their necessity of moving with the president, going to some of these events where there has not been proper social distancing, where people haven't been wearing masks. What does an event like this mean for morale inside of those institutions?
You know, I'm not a Secret Service officer, but I've been around quite a few of them. The Secret Service will do their job. Let me tell you, of all the organizations that are truly the most jealous of their mission, the ones who love their mission, they will do their job at whatever the level of risk is. Now, of course, that's going to impact morale because they are losing personnel to quarantines. And today, his entire personal security detail will have to be quarantined. And they probably won't, because he will probably most likely order that they stay on the job. And when the President of the United States issues an order like that, even though it's life-threatening, they will follow and carry through that order. But Director of Secret Service is going to have to start cycling through, 10, 20 teams of men at a time who aren't going to be quarantined to fill in for these little escapades.
All right, Josh Letterman and Mel.
Cancer doesn't care.
Profits, everybody else in the country has put in precautions that the White House didn't put into place. The White House was not prepared for this kind of outbreak, and so I don't think they're going to. They know that the answer to the question of when the president was tested is an embarrassing answer. And when he called into Sean Hannity's show to have a chat with his friend at 9:50 p.m. on Thursday, he apparently had a test result, a positive test result, but he apparently lied and acted like he was waiting for the result and he didn't know it was going to happen. And we don't know that for sure. We haven't heard the exact details from the White House. But it seems like the president was misleading the country even then on Thursday night. It was like he was in denial about the pandemic right up until that very minute he had to admit there was a positive test result. I mean, for all we know, it was about to leak the same way everything else has leaked before we found out the truth.
Look, their impulse has never been to tell the truth. There's been a fundamental lack of transparency, and it's a lot worse than embarrassing. It appears to be reckless with other people's health. Not just the president's, even though he sees everything through that prism. And so, look, when you defend a liar, you frequently end up lying. But this administration has tried to stonewall the facts and the truth because they're frequently fighting them. And at this point, there's no spinning your way out of this because the COVID is in the building, people.
By the way, I thought it was disturbing that Kayleigh says they're not going to say how many staffers have been testing positive. We need to know how many people around Trump are sick. I'm more worried. I'm so worried about these White House aides and Bedminster workers who may be sick because they're not going to get the attention or the medical attention that the president's receiving.
It's been one heck of a day. Some amazing, amazing moments I've experienced here in the last hour or so. Margaret, I'm going to give you the last word. We only have about a minute left in the show.
Look, I pray the president a speedy recovery, and Mrs. Trump, the First Lady as well, and everybody who has gotten sick. And will they, we pray that they will start communicating a message of seriousness to wear masks, not just wash your hands and do your apparel, wear the masks. It is considerate and safe to wear masks. This will bring the pandemic to a place where we can control it through the winter. And to the American people, we have seen on display the judgment of the commander-in-chief. We have an election in 30 days. This is up for a vote.
Okay, Margaret Hoover, John Avlon, Brian Stelter, thank you all for being with us.
Thanks, Anna.
And thank you at home for being with me tonight. I'm Ana Cabrera in New York. My colleague Wolf Blitzer picks up CNN's breaking news coverage in a special edition of the Situation Room right now. Have a great night.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Welcome to our viewers here in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer in Washington. This is a special edition of the Situation Room. And we begin tonight with a truly stunning day in the presidency of Donald Trump, but one that leaves us with very serious questions about his health and how seriously he's taking this virus. This was about an hour ago. Look at this, just outside the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. This is the President of the United States waving to supporters from inside an SUV, a photo op that seemed unlikely based on what we had learned earlier in the day from the President's own doctor. The assessment of the President's physician, Dr. Sean Conley, was upbeat, but what he told us was rather ominous. And it led our own Dr. Sanjay Gupta to say the president may be sicker than his doctors are letting on. While the president's doctors suggested he could be discharged from the hospital as soon as tomorrow, they also revealed he's taking a new drug, a steroid, one that's recommended by the World Health Organization only for people suffering from the most severe cases of COVID. That's in addition to two other drugs he's taking, a monoclonal antibody cocktail approved only for compassionate use, and remdesivir, which is only for patients with severe COVID who require supplemental oxygen. And all this comes as cases of the virus are surging once again here in the United States. President Trump's infection was one of 54,506 cases reported on Friday by the Johns Hopkins University. That's the highest single-day number of cases we've seen here in the United States since August 14th. That's nearly 2 months ago. Not a good sign. And as the American public is receiving this mixed messaging from President Trump's doctors and the White House, the president himself tweeted this video message from the hospital saying he has learned a lot about COVID.
It's been a very interesting journey. I learned a lot about COVID. I learned it by really going to school. This is the real school. This isn't the let's read the book school. And I get it, and I understand it, and it's a very interesting thing, and I'm going to be letting you know about it.
All right, CNN's Caitlin Collins is joining us from the White House right now. Caitlin, so what's the latest? Your reaction to, first of all, the video that the president posted on Twitter, what it might say about his mindset?
Well, it shows that he's obviously frustrated with the coverage of his hospitalization, and so he's trying to make a public appearance. We had been hearing that the president was trying in some way to appear publicly. That's why they took a video yesterday, another video today, and then he made that drive. But Wolf, in that video that he released about 20 seconds before he left the hospital, before we actually saw him in the car, the president says he's learned a lot about coronavirus now that we are several months into this pandemic, and of course it has killed hundreds of thousands of Americans. He now says he has learned about the coronavirus after contracting it himself. But Wolf, then just moments later, he got into a sealed car with two Secret Service agents who were wearing protective gear just to ride with the president, knowing that he is coronavirus positive and potentially putting them at risk. So it is raising questions about why the president felt the need to take make this drive, and whether the strategy here behind it of the president trying to show his supporters that he is able to do something like get into a car and take a drive at this time is worth putting two people who are there to protect him at risk in the car with them by riding in such close quarters, knowing that he's positive, he's wearing a cloth mask, but they appear to be wearing these medical grade masks. And if you look closely, you can see that the agents have on face shields, and they're also wearing gowns over their clothes as well. So it really gives you a level of indication of what they thought about getting into that car with the president. So it's raising questions about why he felt the need to make this appearance and who, if anyone, told him it was a good idea, including his own physicians that are currently taking care of him.
It clearly was not a good idea, potentially very, very dangerous idea. In fact, Caitlin, stand by. I'm going to get back to you shortly. I want to have more on that presidential photo op that we just saw today, the unannounced, very unexpected quick trip around the hospital on the main street there outside of the Walter Reed Hospital, as you see the president waving to some of his supporters on the sidewalks there. CNN's Jeremy Diamond is outside the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. Jeremy, you were there when the presidential motorcade appeared, a few cars. People clearly were caught off guard.
Yeah, Wolf, it was a surreal scene, and it happened on the street right behind me here. This is where the president's motorcade drove by. There was no warning. There was no notice from the White House that the president was about to do this. The street was blocked off, and then moments later, we saw the presidential motorcade come down this street here, which is right in front of the entrance to the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. And it's where we've seen throughout the day and over the last several days, several dozen of the president's own supporters out here cheering him on, cheering on his recovery. And so the president, we saw earlier in the day, he tweeted out a thank you to those supporters. And then perhaps the president sensed an opportunity as well, which was an opportunity not just to thank those supporters for coming out and showing their support, but also an opportunity at a moment of weakness here, Wolf, for the president, where he is in frail health. He has been dealing with some severe symptoms of the coronavirus. According to his own doctors, he is now on 3 different types of drugs to try and remedy that. And the president perhaps here sensing an opportunity to project strength at that moment of weakness, to send a message to the entire world, but perhaps more specifically, Wolf, to the voting public in the United States, 30 days out from an election, to send a message that he is doing all right, that he is able to get out of the hospital and show his face for the first time in public, Wolf, since the president boarded that helicopter to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center on Friday.
And we did hear earlier, Jeremy, from the president's doctor. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, look, we are at a point where the President of the United States, he is in the hospital. He is dealing with this infectious disease that has killed more than 209,000 people in the United States. And the President's doctor is facing a credibility crisis, and there is simply no other way to put it. Yesterday, we heard Dr. Sean Conley evade questions. He danced around this issue specifically about whether or not the President had received any supplemental oxygen. Today, Wolf, after numerous press reports confirming that the President had indeed received that supplemental oxygen, we heard Dr. Conley conceding that the President had in fact received supplemental oxygen, and in fact that his oxygen saturation levels dropped to a worrying levels below 94%, both on Friday as well as on Saturday, and suggested that the President may have also needed supplemental oxygen yesterday. Now, while Dr. Conley provided more information today, he also addressed this question of why he provided such a rosy and upbeat assessment of the President's health yesterday. I want you to listen to that.
I was trying to reflect the upbeat attitude that the team, the President, that his course of illness has had. Didn't want to give any information that might steer the course of illness in another direction, and in doing so, it came off that we were trying to hide something, which wasn't necessarily true. So here I have it. He is the fact of the matter is that he's doing really well.
And Wolf, there is no reason to believe that.
Take a look at this picture that we have here. 7 people there: the President and First Lady, Senators Lee and Tillis, Kellyanne Conway, Reverend John Jenkins, the President of Notre Dame, and Chris Christie. All of those 7 people in that picture have since tested positive for COVID. Question, Steve, people packed together, the vast majority not wearing masks. How does that make sense?
Well, look, here's what I would say. Tremendous precautions are taken to protect the president. You know, as you well know, anybody who goes to see the president must submit to a COVID test first. And also, there is significant distancing. People don't physically get close to the president, at least people who don't have to. Of course, his family members, some...
Oh, the power went out in the entire building.
The president, who is infected, seriously infected with coronavirus and is on all sorts of medications right now, waving at his supporters from the back of that SUV.
Incredulous, Wolf. What on earth is he thinking? Why would he imagine it's a good idea to go for a photo op joyride when he is sick, when he's on experimental treatments? And what's more, if he wasn't going to look after his own health, what about the people in that vehicle, that hermetically sealed vehicle, those Secret Service agents who are not in a position to say no to the president? It's irresponsible to them. And for what? I mean, I just, you know, after he was explaining how much he'd learned about the virus, to go and do this, it's just unthinkable.
Yeah, it was really, really amazing. You're a member of the so-called Gang of Eight, the top leadership in the House and the Senate, Democrats and Republicans. I take it you guys have not been briefed by the White House on any of this, the president's condition. Is that so?
We have not been briefed on it. And what's more, if foreign nations are looking at taking advantage of the president's potentially diminished capacity, we're not getting briefed on that either. Now, maybe that's not happening. Hopefully that's not happening. But I would hope the administration would keep us in the loop, although I have to say, well, the experience of the last several months where they have withheld or tried to muddy the waters in terms of the intelligence isn't encouraging in terms of their transparency.
Yeah, I'm surprised that the Speaker of the House hasn't been briefed yet either. Is that right?
Well, you know, I don't know. I haven't spoken to the Speaker about it, but I think as of this morning, that's what she was saying. And, you know, the problem, Wolf, is if you had a responsible president who had a diminished capacity because he was taking serious medications, that president would be weighing what's in the best interest of the country. Is it in the best interest now for me to transfer authority to the vice president until I'm through this treatment? But we don't have that kind of president. He's only ever looked out for himself. Which means that we could be potentially at risk if the president's condition were to deteriorate or the drugs were impairing him. And, you know, sadly, given the performance of his doctors in terms of being transparent with the public, it's hard to accept what we hear from the medical staff, and certainly you can't rely on what you hear from the White House staff.
Let me play a little clip of what the president posted, about a minute-long video on Twitter a couple hours or so ago, and in that video, he said this. Let me play it for you, Congressman.
A very interesting journey. I learned a lot about COVID. I learned it by really going to school. This is the real school. This isn't the let's read the book school. And I get it, and I understand it, and it's a very interesting thing, and I'm going to be letting you know about it.
So he's 7 months, 8 months into this this pandemic. He now says, "I learned a lot about COVID." What did you think when you heard that?
Well, he's had experts. He's had access to the very best experts in the world. They've met with him. They've talked with him. He has been told over and over again the importance of wearing a mask and socially distancing. He's been told when Clorox was not a legitimate treatment. He's been told not to push hydroxychloroquine. He doesn't listen to the experts. And the fact that he would leave the hospital and go on that joyride just as a further illustration that he still hasn't learned. Now, look, I hope he makes a speedy and full recovery, and the First Lady and all of the administration and my Republican colleagues in the Senate. I wouldn't wish this nasty virus on anyone. But the hope that he will learn from this experience when he demonstrates yet again by going on this joyride that he hasn't, it's an illusory hope at this point.
Yeah, we all hope he and everyone else who have gotten COVID over the past few days make a speedy recovery. The timeline of the president's illness, though, Congressman, is still unclear. What questions would you like to be answered at this point?
Well, I'd like to know when he got tested, when he knew he was negative, when he first suspected he was negative, What steps did he take to protect his own health? What steps did he take to protect the health of other people around him? Did he knowingly go off to meet with supporters, knowing that he might be infectious because he'd been in contact with others who had been? Why, if he was on Fox and already had one positive test, did he not discuss that? I think there are so many unanswered questions, and because contact tracing is so important to the health of other people around him, and a lot of those other people are also important government officials, we need the truth from the president, we need the truth from the White House, and that has always been in short supply.
Do you have any information, and you're the chairman of the...
And the people viewing this program need to understand this is just campaign rhetoric. Your Bill of Rights will be under attack. They'll be...
Beloved Miami, with Mr. Biden taking questions from a socially distanced audience of undecided voters. Please do join us for this town hall event tomorrow night at 8 Eastern here on MSNBC. Also, set the DVR for Wednesday. That's the vice presidential debate. Mike Pence, Kamala Harris. As of now, they're still set to face off. Provided that they do, you should join us as we join Brian Williams, Rachel Maddow, Joy Reid, and Nicole Wallace for coverage of the one and only vice presidential debate. That's Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern right here. Coming up, we will speak to Congressman Ro Khanna of California. What does he make of President Trump's diagnosis and of what happens next?
Imagine.
Animus order, but other things relating to criminal procedure and other
policy is effectively gone. Congress says we're not privatizing the FAA, and the whole thing was for nothing.
Our flight is early tomorrow.
Thumbs up from the president driving by his supporters. We will have extensive coverage throughout the next hour with reporters in the field, expert interviews. We'll also be joined by White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany and get analysis from our all-star panel. But we begin tonight at Walter Reed with senior political correspondent Mike Emanuel with the president up and out today. Good evening, Mike.
Yeah, Brett, good evening to you. President Trump releasing that new video message on Twitter a short time ago.
It's been a very interesting journey. I learned a lot about COVID. I learned it by really going to school. This is the real school. This isn't the let's read the book school. And I get it, and I understand it, and it's a very interesting thing.
Then in the past hour, there was quite a surprise here in front of Walter Reed. President Trump in his motorcade, driving past his many supporters who've been out here long hours all weekend long. The president grateful for their support, and folks gathered out here were thrilled to see him. As for his treatment for COVID, the president being treated by the White House medical team, doctors here at Walter Reed, and a pulmonary specialist from Johns Hopkins, President Trump's White House physician laid out some of the challenges so far.
Over the course of his illness, the president has experienced 2 episodes of transient drops in his oxygen saturation. We debated the reasons for this and whether we'd even intervene. It was a determination of the team, based predominantly on the timeline from the initial diagnosis, that we initiate dexamethasone.
Dexamethasone is a steroid designed to help COVID patients with breathing. We also got an assessment from a doctor here at Walter Reed earlier today.
Regarding his clinical status, the patient continues to improve. He has remained without fever since Friday morning. His vital signs are stable. From a pulmonary standpoint, he remains on room air this morning and is not complaining of shortness of breath or other significant respiratory symptoms.
The presidential suite at Walter Reed allows him to do his job while receiving medical care. It's equipped like an office away from the White House, and doctors today talked about having the president out of bed as much as possible and to be mobile, with the hope that he can be discharged as soon as tomorrow. It is worth noting former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, who worked with the president on debate prep, checked himself into a New Jersey hospital after testing positive for COVID. Yesterday, Christie suffers from asthma, so this was a precautionary measure. Outside the hospital here, quite a scene. A parade really continuing with lots of honking and Trump 2020 banners trying to send a message to the president who's recuperating inside. Brett?
You can hear that loud and clear. Mike Emanuel outside Walter Reed. Mike, thanks.
outside of Walter Reed Medical Center. We appreciate you. For more, let's bring in Jeff Bennett, MSNBC White House correspondent, McKay Coppin, staff writer at The Atlantic and author of The Wilderness, Jacqueline Alamani, she's the Washington Post reporter and author of the Power Up newsletter, and Dr. Dara Kass, emergency medicine physician at Columbia Medical Center and a Yahoo News medical contributor. All right, Jeff Bennett, I want to start with you. Oh, we also have Malcolm Nance, MSNBC terrorism analyst. Jeff, I want to start with you. Any additional reporting you have in addition to what we just heard from Josh about the White House's thinking, the president's thinking in taking this ride?
Yeah, I think what's remarkable here is how little we don't know about what led to the president's decision to really have that spectacle, that drive-by, where he is, as we know, an active COVID patient. It's important for people to know that any presidential movement is tracked by what's called the White House pool of reporters. That White House pool changes by day. It's a mix of radio journalists, TV journalists, print journalists. And what they do is they do just that. They track every movement a president makes. It's important on a usual day. It's even more important on a day when the President of the United States is, let's be frank about it, hospitalized because he has COVID-19. The White House pool was not given advance notice that he was going to make that trip. We found out much the same way everyone else did when he tweeted that video. And so once the president left, once that drive-by was over, we did not know where he went. We didn't know if he went back to the White House. We didn't know if he went back to Walter Reed. And so that was done by evading journalists, one. And two, as I heard you talk with Malcolm Nance about in the last hour, just sort of the reckless approach to that. I mean, spare a thought for the Secret Service agents who risked their lives day in and day out, but had to unnecessarily risk their lives so that the president could get the sort of adulation that he so desperately needs.
Malcolm, can you add some color to what Jeff just said?
Yeah, there really is a ginormous bubble of people, processes, systems, and protocols that
outreach at the University of Chicago, and that is a big job, and it is a job.
Lawmakers safe and healthy here in Washington, D.C. 3 Republican senators have announced that they have tested positive, and now we have learned that the Senate plans to hold off on floor proceedings until October 19th. Brett?
Mark, thank you. Let's bring in White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany. Kayleigh, thanks for being here.
Good to join you, Brett.
The president seems in good spirits. Obviously did the drive-by of supporters there. What can you tell us?
Yes, he's in good spirits. He's feeling great. I spoke with the chief of staff just before coming to you, and he said he's feeling really good, really strong, wanted to thank his supporters. I spoke with the president yesterday, and he was his typical self, hard at work, dictating a statement, remarks to me, and very meticulous about the precise wording of that statement. So he's hard at work, continues to be, working for the American people.
Hearing what the doctor said today, that it was possible that he would come back to the White House tomorrow, is that what you all are planning for?
Look, it's of course hopeful to have the president back here as soon as possible. We'll leave that to his doctors to deem exactly when that should be. But the president, from what I'm told, is very eager to get back to the White House and get back to work. He's working from Walter Reed, but wants to get back here to the residence.
So can you understand when some people were confused by some of the messaging coming out about the president's condition?
Well, I think what was lost upon a lot of the media is that really Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and Dr. Connally were talking about two different distinct moments in time. Dr. Connally was summing up the president and his condition right then, right there at that moment, and really over the last 24 hours, whereas Mark Meadows was referring to an incident there in the White House where there was some temporary concern about oxygen levels, but it was quickly revised and taken care of before he headed out to Walter Reed.
Yeah, you're talking about the Chief of Staff's quote to the AP where he says the president's vitals over the last 24 hours were very concerning and the next 48 hours will be critical in terms of his care, still not on a clear path to full recovery. But here is Dr. Connally on the oxygen question. Take a listen.
Has he ever been on supplemental oxygen?
Right now, he is not on oxygen.
I know you keep saying right now, but should we read into the fact that he had been previously?
Yesterday and today, he was not on oxygen.
So he has not been on it during his COVID treatment?
He's not on oxygen right now.
I was trying to reflect the upbeat attitude that the team the president, that his course of illness has had. Didn't want to give any information that might steer the course of illness in another direction, and in doing so, it came off that we were trying to hide something, which wasn't necessarily true. So here I have it. He is the fact of the matter is that he's doing really well.
Bottom line, Kayla, is that there were just some mixed messages there, and the president is doing well now.
Yeah, and that was the bottom line Dr. Conley was trying to give yesterday and again today, is that the president has been good. He has been up and working. He has been in good health, and he wanted to give confidence to the American people that their commander-in-chief is getting through this. He will come out on the other side of this, but of course we're cognizant that the next day or two is important, but he's going to get through this, and the chief of staff was very clear-eyed about the episode in the White House where there was the brief lowering of oxygen. The president was not having shortness of breath, and did not feel he even needed oxygen, but out of an abundance of caution that was given to him.
Okay, on the business side, is there still hope in the White House about a coronavirus stimulus bill?
Oh, we certainly hope so. Look, at the moment it seems that Nancy Pelosi is still yet again playing politics, but we've offered not just coming up on our number to $1.6 trillion, we've also offered a one-off bill for airline workers. We know that many airline workers have been laid off. So why not just do one-off bill, something we all agree on, we can come together around. And I think it's notable that the president, even while going through COVID himself, is trying to negotiate COVID relief for the American people. You had Kevin McCarthy today saying that's exactly what they discussed when they had that phone call.
And ideally, as far as time frame, if the doctors give A-OK, you're thinking the president gets back on the campaign trail, goes back to the debate as scheduled in Miami?
Absolutely. Look, this president wants to be out there for the American people. There's nothing he loves more than speaking directly to his supporters. Notably, he did just that with the wave today. Didn't speak to them, but rather acknowledging those out in front of Walter Reed. So he is very hopeful about getting back out there in short order when the doctors deem it appropriate.
All right, Kayla McEnany at the White House, thanks so much for the time.
Thank you, Brett.
To the Access Hollywood tape, but this is going to dramatically hit Trump's numbers. And we already saw a hit in his numbers from the debate. He dropped 10 points. Someone, a source on the campaign told me today he expects that his, Joe Biden's lead to actually increase another 2 to 3 points. But again, this president has a highly contagious disease, and he is out holding a North Korean-esque military motorcade parade to appease his supporters. It's very clear that the president strictly views this through a political lens and not the public health crisis that it is.
In the last hour, Dr. Esther Tu told me that some of the treatments the president is receiving could affect his behavior. Take a listen.
I mean, this is evidence that his behaviors, his treatment course is not being directed by his doctors. There's no doctor that would say now is the time for a joyride around the hospital. He should remain put. He should remain in isolation. And it makes me sick to see him in close quarters with the others in that car who, as Dr. Phillips said, need to go into quarantine right now. And, I'll also say when we put patients on high-dose steroids like that, we monitor them very closely because there's a host of side effects, including impact on their mental health and decision making. You can see delirium or psychosis. You are generally not yourself.
Dr. Cass, do you agree with Dr. Chu's assessment there?
Unsurprisingly, of course, I agree with Dr. Chu's assessment. I think the other thing that she didn't include is that we know there are neurological complications to the coronavirus infection itself. We have seen acute psychosis, delirium, and depression, all as a result of the actual infection. So I think right now, as an acutely infected individual, it is just unbelievable that the president seems to be directing his own clinical care. And when and if he leaves isolation, remembering that millions of Americans have literally sat in isolation rooms by themselves with hundreds of thousands dying alone in hospital rooms. This is just not the time for the president to take a joyride around the hospital.
Jeff, the big question here, the question that has been the question for the last 48 hours is, do you feel you are getting accurate information from this White House about the president's condition?
In a word, no. And I think what's sort of most egregious about this is that the state health department officials who need accurate information in order to do the contact tracing following all of the president's various travels during the past week leading up to his COVID diagnosis, they too, according to my reporting, aren't getting the accurate information that they need. The governor of Ohio has said, Republican governor, by the way, not that it should make a difference, but apparently in this era it does. Republican Governor Mike DeWine says he's heard nothing from the White House about contact tracing, given the fact that the president was in Cleveland for that debate. I spoke to the head of the spokesperson for the Minnesota Public Health Department. He told me he's heard nothing from the White House or the RNC about contact tracing. And then just today, New Jersey health officials finally got the information that they've been demanding for at least a couple of days so that they could contact trace the 200 people who were in that room, in that space with President Trump for that high-dollar fundraiser. He went there knowing that Hope Hicks had tested positive, and we learned from Dr. Conley that the president was exhibiting symptoms of COVID at least as early as Thursday afternoon. So it's not just the White House physician who chose not to level with the American people yesterday. We found out today it was because he wanted to sort of match the messaging from the president's political team, as if that's what the American people come to expect or deserve from a White House physician. It's also that the state health officials who desperately need contact information to make sure that the people who were exposed to the president and other White House officials who were in those states, that those people can take care of themselves so that this doesn't necessarily exponentially balloon into a bigger crisis than it already is.
Malcolm, what does that lack of transparency that Jeff is describing there mean for America's national security?
Well, certainly, none of our allies can feel confident that they know what the President of the United States is doing or thinking. They don't know whether he is in a stable state. They don't know whether he is in an unstable state. They can't rely on anything that they see in the news media because, as we've seen today, he deliberately misleads the news media. He leaves the press pool behind. To tell you the truth, the people who probably have the greatest and most accurate picture of what he's doing in his mind is probably the Russian embassy on Wisconsin Avenue, because his White House uses unsecure phones and they leak like a sieve. So which means that they're out there intercepting all of these communications of Mark Meadows, Ivanka Trump, Melania Trump, people who are hanging around his inner circle, and they probably have the information that we don't have. These people don't take national security very seriously. They take politics seriously, and that doesn't mean that it's going to work out for any of us.
Okay, let's not forget that there is a COVID relief package on Capitol Hill. There's a conversation about a Supreme Court justice. How does this complicate everything that is supposed to be the focus on Capitol Hill right now?
Well, for one thing, there have been a number of lawmakers who have also contracted this virus in the midst of this outbreak, and it's raised questions about whether with all the Republican senators who have gotten sick and are not going to be able to be on the Hill for at least a little while, Republicans in Congress are going to be able to push forward with the nomination, for example, of Amy Coney Barrett. The relief package also is a top concern. Now, some of these things can be handled virtually. The Senate in particular has been doing some of their hearings virtually. But I don't think we necessarily know that we've seen the end of which lawmakers have gotten sick, and obviously Democrats on the Hill are calling for postponement of all these, at least the confirmation hearings until they can get past these illnesses. And so there are a lot of question marks aside and apart from the president's health that impact the American people, and I think we're still seeing that cascading effect play out.
All right, Jeff, McKay, Jacqueline, and Dr. Cass, thank you all so much. Malcolm, thanks to you. Coming up, the president may still be getting treatment by the time his vice president hits the debate stage. How his diagnosis will affect this week's debate. But first, here's Richard Louie with some of the other stories we're following today. Richard?
Good evening to you, Alicia. Some of the stories that we're following for you tomorrow, marking the first time in 17 years the Supreme Court will begin a term without Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Her seat on the bench will be draped in black as the 8 remaining justices begin hearing cases. Case topics include Obamacare and mail-in voting. Crews are starting to slowly get the glass fire in California's Napa Valley under control. That fire is now more than 15% contained after starting last Sunday. It's burned more than 60,000 acres and hundreds of homes. And are you ready for more Monday Night Football? The Patriots and Chiefs play tomorrow night after today's game was postponed. 2 players from each team tested positive for COVID, including Pats quarterback Cam Newton, who will not play. American Voices will be right back.